This is John Singer Sargent, and today I've decided to paint a portrait that he did around the year 1900, a portrait of Robert Brough. I've decided to start with this portrait because it's very nicely designed. It's simply designed with the light at the top of the forehead, going down to sort of the darkest flesh tones, and then the black suit that he's wearing, which just makes it very concise, well organised, simplified, and a good portrait to copy and to learn from. The equipment and materials that you'll need are firstly a canvas. Now, at most art supply shops, they sell very bad quality canvas, so you can improve the quality of your canvas. What I've done here is I've just bought some average canvas, stretch canvas, and on top of the canvas I've actually primed it with some earth coloured tones, and just unified the surface as best I can with a palette knife and oil paint. So it's kind of an oil primed canvas. It improves the quality of the average canvas on offer and just makes it nicer to paint on. Now you're going to need your paint brushes, a palette to mix your paints on, and I would highly recommend using a flesh tone white, a yellow ochre, a vermilion red, a light brown, a burnt umber, which is a darker, cooler brown, a black, and a Viridian Green. Now, this is just the palette that I've come to trust and use, and I enjoy using to paint portraits and mix flesh tones with, and mix, hair colour with over the years. You will come to create your own palette of choice as you experiment and as the years go by. But this is just a good basic palette to start with, something that I would highly recommend to go with. I'll leave a list of the colours in the notes below, so you can try this palette out and let me know what you think in the comments. When you're painting portraits, you don't need a lot of big brushes. You need a lot of small brushes. We're painting a head to the scale of life, and so there's a lot of detail around the eyes, around the nose and the ears, etc. So you'll need a lot of small brushes for that, and some medium-sized brushes for broader strokes in the hair and the background. So choose a variety of brushes that are sort of small, and a couple of medium-sized ones, just like this. The last piece of kit that you'll need is a little pot of turpentine. You can get non-toxic turpentine if you desire, and you can also just get white spirit, whatever you prefer. It's crucial for cleaning your brushes in the middle of painting. There might be a lot of build-up of paint on the brush, and you just need a clean brush quickly. You dip it in turpentine, you wipe it off, and you're ready to go again with a cleaner sort of brush, ready to make a clean mark on the canvas. Otherwise, you're going to just need dozens and dozens of brushes to keep getting, making clean brush marks and brush strokes, and that's just not practical. So, a little pot of turpentine, you can just dip it in like this, wipe it off on an old rag or some kitchen towel, and you're ready to go again. You're ready to make a new mark on the canvas as you need to. Sketching in the portrait. Now, there are various ways of doing this. There's so many different ways to paint, there's so many different ways to draw, there's so many different ways to peel an onion, but I'm going to do a whole other video on how to draw and sketch in a portrait. So it's going to take a whole other video to explain that, but essentially you want it to look something like this, with bold marks to direct your first steps when you're painting, where the hair is, where the eyes are, nose bridge, and you're ready to go. you're ready to begin. You're ready to start mixing paint and putting paint onto the portrait. So here we go, laying in the portrait. What you want to do is you want to start with the darkest darks and the lightest lights, but start with the darkest darks so you can easily see where things go on the canvas. So you start with the hair, start with the eyes, start with the darkest shadows and the dark clothing, then go to the lightest lights on the top of the forehead and start laying in your painting. Here's an idea of how to mix some light flesh tones. You're using white, yellow ochre and vermilion to start with, and then you want to get as close to the image or the person, if you're painting someone from life, as you possibly can. I usually add some light brown, and this is usually the flesh tones are still quite light and bright when you're just using vermilion, yellow ochre and white. I dumb it down, or I neutralize it by using something like a burnt umber. It just sort of gives a cooler tone to the flesh, because in real life people don't have bright, there are usually cooler tones in flesh tones. People don't have these bright orange faces. And when you're mixing your darker colours, predominantly it's going to be black, but you want to put a lot of brown in as well. Never use just black. It just looks completely flat, and there's in nature, in real life, there's nothing is really just black. There's always some white in it, or some brown, or some red, or something. But you'll get used to this, and it'll become easier as you just practice and play with the paint. Don't be scared of the paint. The paint is your friend, and it does wonderful, wonderful things. Just go for it and try and experiment. And once you've established your basic flesh tones, the lightest lights in the forehead, and the dark of the hair and the eyes, and the darkest shadows, once you've got your basic flesh tones in the initial laying, then go ahead and put the background in quite quickly. It will just help you see the shape of the face as a whole once the background's in, and it will really help you going forward. And you can see here that I've gone back to painting the dark of the shadows. I've put quite a lot of reds into the shadows. Never, like I said, never put just black in the shadows or in the darks. And you can see with my brush, I really draw. It's quite loaded with paint, and I really try and draw the shapes. And try and make some nice marks with my brush. You're trying to make nice marks, nice interesting marks, so the whole portrait eventually vibrates with different shapes and marks and brushwork that makes the painting unique to you, your style, your signature, your way of painting. And we carry on with our laying of the portrait, and we're constantly trying to find the right shapes, walking back 2, 3, 4 meters, whatever space you have to work in, to look at, is the eye working with the ear, is the shadow the right tone compared to the top of the forehead, and just to start mixing the colors on your palette. The lightest light of the forehead that I'm painting here, you can see is a lot of white and ochre, and you go back over it, go back into it, make more marks, go back over what you've done to keep trying to get the flesh tones. In this portrait I was looking to think, is the forehead too, is it not, it's not light enough yet, so I just went back into it and created, made it lighter. And with oil paint, it's so versatile, it's so malleable and beautiful to use. You can always change it, and if it doesn't work, you just scrape it off and start again. So don't be scared to play with oil paint. It's the most wonderful substance to use in art. I mean, I'm biased as I'm a portrait painter, but it really is just a magical substance. I'm not even using particularly expensive paints here. They're just cheap paints that you can buy in any old art shop, and nothing special at all. But they still do wonderful things. So keep going back over it. Don't ever think that you've got the right tone and that's it. It might be at that moment, it might be the right tone, but then when you put the darkest shadows underneath, you realize it's not light enough, or it's too dark, or you're constantly adjusting, constantly reworking areas, and eventually it creates a beautiful vibration in the painting. The overall effect, once you've finished and once you've stood back and said that's it, that's done now, is a beautiful vibration of a portrait. So as you can see here, we're sort of halfway through our lay-in, and you want to make the marks at the moment. They're bold. I'm drawing the paint in, and I'm trying to get different movements within the painting. And this is my setup. So I've got the table with all my equipment on, and I've got my iPad with the painting next to the portrait, and I'm just walking back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, looking at the image, the John Singer Sargent portrait that I'm painting from, and just going over and over and over. I mean, you can see in this time lapse that I'm reworking areas over and over again, and these tiny little movements, these tiny little brush vibrations, over time they change the overall look of the portrait. So all these little decisions that you're making along the way, to change the ear this shape, or the eye, or the movement of the highlight on the nose, eventually overall it creates this bigger universe, this bigger sort of world that you're creating on the canvas. And as you can see from my palette, I've got my darkest darks right on the left, and then the lightest lights on the right hand side. So right now I'm mixing a sort of flesh tone for you to see for the cheek, and as you can see, it goes the lightest light, sort of mid-tones around the cheeks, and then it goes sort of darker and cooler around the neck area. And that's the beautiful thing about John Singer Sargent, is he just designed portraits so well and simplified things. So when the eye is looking at something, it just makes sense, and it's always it's not like looking at a photograph, it's a painting. We want to make portraits and paintings that look like paintings. I hate photorealistic paintings. They don't do anything for me. It's like looking at a photo. I want a painting to look like a painting, like someone has made it, someone's created it, someone has it's an object, it's an artistic object, it's an artifact, a work of art, and you can sort of see the spirit of the artist in the brush marks. So as you can see, my palette here has the darkest darks to the lightest lights going from left to right, and I'm just using a different brush here. I'm using a very small brush here to just get the highlights in the eyes, and this is a great part of the portrait painting process. You just want to take a tiny little brush, tiny little dab of white, and you want to go and find where you're going to put the highlights in the eyes, and all of a sudden the portrait should come together and come to life, and it's a great part. And you can always adjust these. I adjusted the highlight on this particular portrait various times. You're going for where to put the highlight, but it might not be right, so you just adjust it. And all those adjustments are great. It makes the painting look like it's been worked and thought over, and decisions have been made, and these are all critical parts of painting and creating a beautiful portrait. So now we've got the highlights in the eyes, and you can see that the whole portrait, it's brings it to life, and it's an exciting part. Highlights are quite bright at the moment, and as we don't worry too much about that, as we keep working the eyes and working the different areas, it will naturally just come down. The brightness will come down, and you're constantly going for what you see, the image that you see, the John Singer Sargent portrait that I'm trying to copy here to learn from. Here I'm just softening areas and edges. One of the main things when you're painting portraits is the transitions. So the transition from the background to the head, the back of the head to the front of the head, and all of the edges, the edge from the light on the forehead to the edge of the eyebrow, to the edge of the eye, to the edge of the nose bridge, all of that just soften. And as John Singer Sargent said in his notes, he left very few bits of writing about his art, but one of the letters he did say, you want to try and blend everything into everything. And as I'm just pointing out here, keeping the portrait organized, keeping the lightest light in the forehead, in the cheeks, the midtones, and the darkest darks under the shadow area. And that way, when you're looking at the portrait, it makes sense. It makes sense to you. You read that as a human being, because that's how human beings look in nature. Always keep refining. This portrait took me about maybe 4.5 hours to paint, a lot of probably 2 hours of that was refining and adjusting, and here we have the final piece. This is what it looks like in the end. So leave your thoughts and comments below, and I hope you like this first video that I've done. I want to do a lot more, and I want my channel to become a real resource for artists trying to learn how to paint portraits and trying to learn how to paint. So leave your comments below and subscribe for more portraits and more videos and more knowledge about how to create works of art coming out every week. Thank you for watching.